Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Secret of the Ooze. I'm actually rocking the Turtles merch for once. Because I've been watching a lot of Black Nerd comedy, Andre, and really, I've gone into certain Ninja Turtles videos, and then I'm just like, oh man, like, I actually am just kind of really interested in getting back into this. Plus, also, I kind of restructured quite a bit of thumbnails, and then realized that I had gone through today and just kind of restructured a lot of my Ninja Turtles thumbnails. So really, I was kind of itching because I had to kind of go through and watch certain parts of certain movies and shows and whatever to get thumbnails. And then I'm like, you know what, I really want to go back into this. So also, it was really convenient that this movie was an hour and 20 minutes or 28 minutes. So, a lot of convenient things going on here. So, firstly, we would come to find at some point in our lives that there is to be another group that is to combat Ooze, which is to, of course, be teenagers with attitudes fighting off Ivan Ooze, Power Rangers. And we'd also have me want to go on and state some obvious things, even kind of looking at this photo here, that there is to be a restructuring going on with Donatello in this film, dipping into a little bit of the secrets. So, in the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the guy who is playing Kino in this film had gone on and played Donatello in prior film. So that is the reasoning for the restructuring of this character. And we'd also, if we're going to go in through secrets here, if the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, we'd have the April and Donatello scene where Donatello is talking about a Kodak moment and he starts to, ha ha ha. You can go on in the mouth of the, if you pause it just right, you can go on and see the teeth and the eyes of the kind of puppeteer character going on and saying those lines in that movie. And I thought that was kind of really interesting. But if that was a little goof up, a little hiccup that people got to figure out, we would turn around and in the traditional pre-fight donut scene, if anything, you're going on and seeing Leonardo raise his arms. Well, come to find out, Leonardo is showing a little bit more than shell. He's showing some human flesh upon his arm because there is a tear in the costume, and you can see what, of course, is to be skin. Thought that was kind of hilarious. So, if I'm going on and also ruining people's childhoods by kind of going on and talking and besmirching this film at some points, we would have, at the very early stages of this film, we'd come to find Splinter, who is kind of meditating, and is to eventually go on and talk to the turtles about the canister. We'd come to find that someone is to go on and ask, well, hey, where is Splinter? And Splinter goes on and states, coming to a decision. There is a really long-winded gap between coming and then to a decision. And I found that to just be freaking hilarious. Because if you pause it just right, you can get a pretty good gag. So, right after that also, he's talking about, bizarrely, shadows and penetration. I'm like, Splinter, you're getting a little weird on me. You're getting a little dark there, buddy. Something's going on with Splinter. Really, there's something wrong with that rat. So, followed up, we'd come to find that there is to be some unsung heroes within this film as well. We'd come to find out that Kevin Nash had gone on to play Super Shredder, And the story behind that, of course, was that the people who had gone on to do this movie were to go through the WCW locker room at that time, because eventually it went on to be combined with WWE. And so Kevin Nash was to fit the bill of just being a really tall guy for these characters to go on and just be like, yeah, like, we need you, like, hey, like, you want to be a part of this film? It's like, yeah, of course. So Kevin Nash has a whole story about it, I'm sure, on his YouTube channel. But hey, like, that's kind of the really easy, brief story of it. But also, we'd come to find that Kevin from the Backstreet Boys had gone on to do the dance portion in the later part of the film. We'd have, I think, somewhere in the ether, him going on and even kind of pointing out which one of the turtles he actually was in this film. So that, I think, was rather interesting. So, other than that, I think I probably spent them all with all of the real legitimate kind of little Easter eggish like things. Oh, Token Razor. Come to find out, really actually weren't really in the cartoons, and it really should have been Bebop and Rocksteady. I think everybody was kind of feeling that, but for whatever reason, yeah, they just decided to just go with Tokar and Razor. So the cartoon later on had to just kind of justify these characters and kind of insert them in the cartoon to make the fans eventually happy for this fan service. So yeah, so really, I thought that this movie, we're gonna get to pretty dang close to the grading of this one, and then go into full-on spoilers, because I feel like we have a little bit more of details and goofy jokes or whatever, possibly, when we get rolling into this whole spoiler part. But who knows? Maybe I'll just go on and just re-explain everything and just. But anyways, where can you go on and also see this movie? I think it's supposedly state that a lot of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff is available on Paramount, but legitimately, I'll go on and give you a number of apps that you can in fact watch this movie for absolutely free instead of going to Paramount. Because heaven forbid you go on and you see Ninja Turtles, the movie, and then also go on into uh, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, the original one, because you're gonna just be on a kick of just wanting to watch all this Ninja Turtle stuff. And also, you're gonna realize in the sequel there's no Casey Jones in this movie. What a disappointment. But he'll be in the third one, which will just be a lackluster film for the quasi point. There's some good jokes in that third one, but the time travel, April O'Neil short hair. Oh, they had also gone on and recasted April O'Neil, and in the very early parts of this movie have to go on and have to do a way of which to help the audience understand that this is to be a new April O'Neil, which I don't like. I don't like the actors who had gone on to play this April O'Neil. I just don't like how they approached it. Like, I get it, like, it's a good way to introduce the character, but like, you really could have just had her go on to make her way into her place, and then eventually the turtles arrive. I'm like, okay, like, I guess this has to be our April O'Neil, and then yeah, like, it would have been easily understood instead of that actual introduction. But it is what it is. We'd also have Professor Perry in this movie. For whatever goofy reason, we of course have this actor who had recently passed away, and with him also being in stuff like Tron and a number of things. But I think a lot of people immediately go on and look to this actor within this film because he had really put on a really fun and cool performance, with him just kind of being this uh, just kind of lab coatish like guy. So, with that said, this movie, regardless of its flaws, regardless of its super delicious, iconic, traditional pre-fight donut, this movie is great. I feel it's still great. It still holds up. It's still a lot of fun. Because of course it doesn't give you a CGI like film. It's still dudes in suits, like we've always ever enjoyed. More than likely, people can also go on and enjoy the other Ninja Turtles films that Alan Richardson would go on and state that nobody wanted to do those movies, and the Turtles eventually were treated poorly in that film. And he had gone on and there's a whole entire video of their out there stating the issues with that. But I digress. But these movies, for all they were to be meant to put together, were really just a lot of fun. So, like for me, I'm getting to another win. Yay! Uh, but thank you to Black Nerd Comedy for going on and warming me up to get back into doing more TMNT, because really it was also just very convenient that this movie was only an hour and 28 minutes. But also just like, man, I wanted to always kind of get into these, but like sadly enough on my end, like stuff like this probably isn't going to be as trending or whatever as I'd like it to, but oh well. It's fun regardless. So, with that said, I think it's about time to state that it's about time to go ninja, go ninja, go. Maybe you should not have gone on and eaten so much pizza. That's probably why you have problems going. Into spoiler territory. Great. This movie was great. I don't care what anybody says. Token Razor, that I think when I was a young lad was to have given me the heebie-jeebies, and gave me some night problems. Especially that scene where Razar is just like in the scene while he's flinging Mikey around. I was so terrified that Mikey was eventually gonna get hurt from getting flung by that monsterish man. How could you do that to Michelangelo, my favorite? My favorite out of them all. Anyways, let's go on into full-on spoilers. It's about that time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie and dust off my phone for whatever I'm to just have in this bad boy. Because maybe I'll probably forget who the heck Professor Perry is, or Freddy, the foot guy that eventually just had the dandelion, and all these other things I will probably at some point just have a brain fart and not remember. A little scene or a little ditty somewhere. There'll be a really good joke that eventually I will have probably forgotten about. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to pause this video and get out what I'm to get out. Alright, we're back. So, very beginning of this film, we would come to find that Kino is to be this pizza man going on and getting a order of pizza because it seems that everybody in the world is eating pizza consistently. Every opening of every one of these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, everybody's going and scarfing down a pizza in the New York style. They're folding it in half and eating it in that manner. And I had just gone on the night before, bizarrely, and eaten some like New York style pizza that had to be folded in half, and I'm like, okay, like I can see or understand like the pleasantry of folding a pizza in half, but like I think maybe years ago I had gone on and done that consistently, but like I think it just at one point like kind of got beaten out of me to where I just like was to have a pizza like the just normal way. I don't know. And never again had I gone on and never chose to fold a pizza, because then I would just rationalize I should just get a calzone at that point. But anyways, like, hey, to each their own. Regardless of whatever way you are to hold your pizza, it's all good. It's all food. It's all delicious. So we would go on to have Kino, who is of course get another order of April O'Neil's pizzas. Like, man, like, what is she gonna go and open up a surplus store for? Like, is she putting these things in a warehouse somewhere, like to be watched over by top men? Like, what's going on with these pizzas? So Kina's going on and overhearing via the chef in the distance about, like, well, hey man, like, just kind of make sure that you're just getting the order out and this and that. And Kina's like, yeah, like, I'm gonna get out of here and I'm just gonna continue on with this review and talk about the things that I need to say. Heaven forbid I forget half of that I have to go on and remember. So Kino is to go on and make his way to some lovely ladies and just be like, ooh, look at that. Ooh, cat calling and all this jazz. And so Kino is like, And the girls are just like, yeah, in your dreams, Kino. And Kino's like, well, yeah, if it is going to be in my dreams, I'd be dreaming of something a little bit thinner. Peace, A-Town. So Kino goes on to his goofy scooterish like thing and is to make his way seemingly at first to April's location. But then the further and further Kino is to go on and just bizarrely need to do some investigation upon his own fruition, he is to come to find some pantyhoseried men making their way into this seemingly establishment to steal some to rob these people blind. So Kino is to make his way into this strip mallish like locale and is to go on and see that these pantyhosened men are to be stealing some boxes. And so we'd have Kino coming in like, I'm sorry, sirs, but I have to have evoken my citizen arrest upon you. Book 'em, Dano, book 'em. So we'd immediately have this pantyhosen goon that is to do the dumbest thing that I've ever seen in my life by clearly taking his mask and completely opening it up and just being like, oh, hey, who the heck are you? Like, you're not some cop, you're just some pizza man. So, like, how about we just go on and just beat up this guy? So they try, and Kino, of course, is to be just slapping him down like nobody's business. He's to just put the boots to all of them and just be laughing his way down to, like, think that he's going to be all victorious here and just be a surf ninja at some point in his life with Rob Schneider. But instead, it seems, he is to all of a sudden be seemingly outnumbered by all the other pantyhose wearing men. They're to be forced to just come out of the woodwork here. So Kino is like, oh, yeah, I'm getting a little outnumbered here. And here, of course, is when the cavalry comes on in with the theme music and the jumping up way too absurdly high within the skies to be the Ninja Turtles. So, does that sound familiar to anybody? Because that sounds very much similar to the actual Axel Foley Beverly Hills Cop theme music. I had really gone on and realized that because the video had to showcase that to me, that like the music is very much the same. Because I'd seen Sony like kind of play it on a double keyboard. It's really interesting. But so we would of course have Kino, who's watching as Leonardo is to come on and say that things are awesome. Raph comes in and he states that things are wicked. And then Donnie busts in and he's like, eclectic. And Mikey's like, eclectic Jeep. Like, come on, Donnie, you failed so many times at this point. Are you gonna bust out the Frere Jacques later? Because this is gonna just ruin. How many times is Donnie just gonna fail here? Like, you would think a dude with just like an IQ better than all of the rest, that he could just be impressive for frickin' once. Like, we would go on and have him and Casey Jones have a good alphabet exchange in the first film, right? With the hose brain and the gack face, and but then again, Donnie comes up with eclectic. Right, great, nice one, Donnie. Go ahead and just be a spring toy later. It's all good. So we would start to see our Ninja Turtles separate here to eventually realize how very few stuntmen that they really need in this film. And so we would come across, of course, a number of assortment of things. So we would, of course, have Donnie eventually realizing there is to be this massive toy that is to go on and just be kind of weirdly spring loaded, and it's kind of going all over the place. And so he's like, yeah, yeah, really just enjoying this spring loaded Jack in the Boxy like assortment of just goodies and goofiness. And we would then have Donnie, who of course is to be just kind of standing here within this assortment of toys, to eventually put out a finger, and a goon is to notice this and just be like, oh yeah, hey, like, let's push this thing off to the side. And Donnie goes and kind of grabs this one thing and just like, ha, 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 and then he tosses it to the guy. He catches it like, brah, brah. So we'd have Leonardo, who goes on to toss his swords to the sky. It's like, now you see him, now you don't. And he's to grab onto these swords, and he's to go on and kind of have the one hit the other of the goons, and then he goes on to kind of drop kick one of the other goonish characters. We'd have Raph, not Ralph, Wreck-It Ralph. Anyways, we have Raph, who is to go on and collect Kino and put him in this trash bin. And we would, of course, also have Mikey, who is to be yo-yoing, walking the dog around the world, pow, 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 smacking a bunch of the goons all up in this biznitch. And so we then turn around and have Mikey, who, of course, is to be at the seemingly cold cut meat placing, and he is to be knocked over by one of the goons, and he falls, and he is to grab one of the goons, toss him in there, and just be hobbling around and jumping and whichever. And then some other goons are to be present there, and he is to grab the cold cuts, and he's combat cold cuts. Freaking takes the nunchucks and so everybody's getting their licks in. We'd have the two goons running off, and Mikey's like, next time I'll get mustard. So we'd have Kino, who is just flopping around within this trash can, wanting to see this all to have played out here. And Mikey's to go on and give him a hand. So we'd have Kino, who's looking at these turtles, and he's like, and Raph is going on and telling Kino, it's like, well, hey, like, you go on, you call the police, like, we'll tie him up. So we'd have Kino, of course, who was like, well, hey, I can pitch in, like, I can fight. And it's like, no, like, go, call. So Kino goes on and calls, and when he makes his way back, we'd have every single one of these goons all seemingly tied up in this little pack. And Kino's like, wow, like this is impressive. Like I was only gone for X number of minutes here. So transition to then have April. April is to show up, is to have a different voice, but we all, of course, know her as April O'Neil. She's not really putting on any yellow jumpsuit, so we're also just kind of like, that's another miss. So April is going on and making to her humble abode as she's to be met by these two other apartment owners within this place, and they are to mention like, "Oh yeah, you're April O'Neil." It's like I I I watch your channel 6 all the day and whatever, and so yeah, like really, it's all just an introduction to this character. And April is to go on and make her way into her apartment, where she is to see a number of things that is to all kind of connect to certain characters. The skateboard and comic books are to be Leonardo and Donatello. Raph is to have the chest expander, and Mikey is to, of course, have the snake within the fridge. And when after April is to be terrified within the snake of the fridge, she is to then look around upon this messy place and realize that the rat is the cleanest one out of all of them. So we would, of course, go on to have the turtles show up and be ever so much victorious to where they want to go on and immediately tell April of what they had gone on and done for the night, and also to have obtained these pizzas. So, funny enough, we of course have them want to go on and want to play around with these pizzas in a very footballish like manner. And so, like, after they had already gone on and put salt upon this pizza that's not good enough, they have to all of a sudden play around with it and probably fling all the salt of which that they had just put on this pizza to ruin. How dare they? But so we'd have Mike, who it seems is going to put on the quarterback toss here and to perform the Statue of Liberty play, and we'd have Raph, who's just kind of waiting for the slice to have cometh, and it does. And we'd have Raph, who is to go on and be like, touchdown, yeah, like, yeah, pa, we did it. It was a success. And April is like, no, my 4, don't ruin my 4. And it's like, no, we got it. But then, like, April at this point is just like, God, I hate you people. I want you gone. So we would, of course, have our characters going on and reminiscing, which eventually is to bring us to them remembering that they have to go on and eventually still have to worry about the Foot Clan, because there should really not be any real threat of any kind of Shredder, forcing then Raph to recreate the Shredder getting fallen from the dumpster within the very first movie to kind of show us where our characters are now. And so we have Raph who's like, and he fell in the dumpster. Nah! And we would, of course, have Splinter who's just like, Raph, come away from there. Like, you guys need to continue to practice the art of invisibility. And so we'd, of course, have Splinter that is going on and looking at April and realizing, like, how much he's just like, God, I'm just so sick of you people. And Splinter is like, oh, like, take care, child. We will not be here for much longer. And the turtles are just like, huh? And so Splinter is going on and telling them it's like, well, hey, um, like if anything, we've spent like Splinter's going on and telling the turtles that we have like spent so much time technically on the surface world, but they are to always realize that they need to go on and live a life in the shadows, and that is to be the life that they have to kind of be forced to live in. And eventually Michelangelo is to just be like, well, yeah, but like the pizza, like we deserve pizza, right? So of course we'd have Splinter is like, well, yeah, pizza's okay. So it's like, man, I'll die a heart attack. So we'd have Splinter going on and telling the turtles to leave the Shredder buried, as we come to find that Shredder is to be giving himself a little bit of handy uh, out of the garbage to make us realize that he's going to come back. So we'd have the Foot Clan that are going on to realize that their fallback was at this junkyard, and we'd have Tatsu who's coming in, and he's like, "They took our father. Mia, they will pay. Mia, I am Tatsu, leader of the Foot. For anyone who challenged, step forward." And then we have the Shredder coming in, like, "I challenge. Find her, silence her." That was in the first movie. What are you talking about? Uh, and so we'd go on and have one of the Foot that's just like, his face. Look at his face, and we don't even get to see, but it's all up. So, transition to April O'Neil going on and doing a interview with Professor Perry here. So Professor Perry is to be kind of the lead tech guy of the TGRI, and it's the TGRI, right? It's not the TCRI, right? I think it's the TGRI. So I'm going to go with that, hoping that that's the right thing that I said here. So we'd go on and have Perry who's talking to April, and he's just like, well, hey, like you're gonna allow me to just kind of rant and kind of stumble and fumble, because I think I'm gonna go on and I'm definitely gonna do that at some point. And April is like, well, yeah, like about that, like we're live right now and you're talking and you're messing up and you're whatever. So we'd have all of the turtles going on and watching on uh, April's newscast, because of course that's what they usually like to do. And Raph is just like, yeah, you know what? Is there anything else on? Like, come on, like. So Raph is going on and really just wanting to change the channel. Maybe Oprah's on, and he turns next to Mikey and he sits there, and Mikey is to just be. He's chewing on this thing like nobody's business. We're just hearing him just wolf down this thing. Like his life depends on it, because it does. And Raph ends up turning to Mikey and he's just like, can you chew any louder? I can still hear out of this one. And Mikey ends up going on and like, just even louder. And Mike is like, ah. So we'd again have our characters being tempted to just switch the channel, but Splinter ends up kind of just appearing out of nowhere, and he's just like, no, do not change channel. Because I need to go on and eventually give you guys a little heads up about where you guys came from. So we turn around and have April, who is to make her way to uh, to kind of wrapping up her interview. She goes on and is to meet the new guy, Freddy, and she's tempted to ask him a question, but then she's like, "Well, yeah, I don't know, like I'll probably come up with something. I'm very observant and very astute, so like, maybe you're not going to get away without me asking you one question about something or other." So we'd come to find out that this new guy, Freddy, is just a Foot Clan in disguise. So we'd have these tech guys that are going through and starting to realize that there had been a little dab of the ooze that had gone on to unleash itself upon these flowers, these daisies, or these whatever the flower ends up actually being. So not daisies, but these yeah, I said it right. Whatever the flower name. Um, so they'd rip off this big flower, and it's like, okay, we got to run to give this to Perry. So we'd have Freddy that kind of sneaks into here and is ripping off this flower as well to bring this to Shredder. Just like, well, hey, like these things are getting abnormally large, so like if anything, like I'm gonna give this to Shredder to like be like, hey man, like if you need some steroids, some blue chew, here's where it is in this in this this oozing container. So we'd have Perry, who's to be grasping this flower and is to just be whiffing it and just being like, oh, all right, well. So April makes her way home to go on and talk to the turtles, and it seems that after that news report, Splinter has gone on to be meditating and is to have been very reserved. And so it's like, well, yeah, like so what has Splinter really been doing? Splinter's like, coming. Hold, wait, bust that nut to a decision. So we'd have, of course, Splinter that is to need to have the turtles make their way up to the rooftop to go on and give them this story of shadows and penetration to tell our turtles that they have a origin that is to be connected with that news report with the canister that of course Splinter is to go on and have from the original film. So we'd have the past returns here, and we'd have our mutant turtles here that have to go on and realize that they need to go back to this facility to see if there may be any canisters left behind for them to go on and try and uh, really understand more about their upbringing. their possible origins, but then also like maybe going on and hoping that this ooze could maybe give them a lot of answers from their past. So on top of that, we'd have Shredder, who is to have also wanted the exact same uh, thing going on here with, of course, Freddy giving him this flower. So we'd have the TGRI guy who is to have gotten kidnapped, and we make our way into this facility, the TGRI scene. So I said that right in the first place. Good God. So luckily I figured that out. So we'd go on to the TGRI facility and we'd have Raph who's turning the turtles and he's like, well, let's do it. And Donnie, the ever so spin doctor, is like, yeah, let's do it, huh? Very macho and very, yeah, like that's Raph's forte. So we have our characters rolling into this facility, and Mikey is going on and seeing this oddballish like mechanism that he's trying to figure out where the quarters go. And they come to this computer because it seems that this is to be a place of a ghost town. So we'd have Donnie who is thumbing through with these massive fingers of his through this computer. Somehow I don't know how he's doing this, but he's looking at all of these canisters that are disposed, and we then have our turtles that's like, well, like, we gotta figure out if there's any ooze left. And we, of course, have Donnie who's like, well, yeah, like, it would be great to figure that out, but the more and more we start to thumb through this computer, the more we might also have to realize that there might be some kind of security in place that could go on and kind of wipe out the hard drive and everything. And so Donnie is starting to go through and realize that there is one active canister left. And so they're like, well, hey, like, can we look more into this? And Raph is like, yeah, do it. So Donnie goes and does it and comes to find out that ends up kind of folding the whole thing of the computer. And they're like, oh, no, no, no. And then, of course, is when Tatsu ends up coming in with all of his foot soldiers. So I'm like, great, awesome. This is just like the first film. If there is to be so many shades of the first film to be in place here, because we also come to find that Raph is to be outnumbered and beaten up by the Foot Clan in the first movie. We have him in the later part of this movie get beaten up again as well. And also, we'd have the Foot Clan just seemingly almost outnumbering the Turtles, but there is no Casey Jones in this film. God dang it. I love me some of that Casey Jones, even though it's Stephen Amell, when eventually he is to be Casey Jones. Man. Sorry, Stephen Amell. Like, you didn't get the good Casey Jones. You just got the, we just need this character in this movie, Casey Jones. Anyways, so we would again have our characters going on and separating to divide and conquer here. So we have Mikey who is to go on and take these kind of glass, like test tubish like things, and is to toss one of these things to have the canister go a flying. And so now our characters are trying to figure out a way to get to said canister. So we'd go on to come to find that a bunch of our characters are to probably grasp this canister, but then fumble it. And eventually, this goes into the hands of a foot soldier, who, of course, is to be this massive Esh-like dude. So the turtles huddle up together and like, okay, uh, like, there's obviously a plan coming here. So the turtles are to go on and just be rolling and dancing and whichever, making their way to this big, massive dude. And we'd have Mikey, who obviously just headbutts him in the nuts, and he falls over. The canister goes a flying, and really, for how we're getting these footballish tosses and all these other things kind of going on, it all ends up right back into the hands of the foot soldiers, and we eventually have Ninja vanish, and we'd have Mikey by the end of, again, their repertoire of them spouting all these words. We'd have Mikey who's like, "Well, busted!" Yeah. So we'd have Shredder, after going on and obtaining the Ooze canister, he's turning to Professor Perry, is like, okay, let's see what this Ooze can do. And we're turning around and having the turtles realize that it's like, you know what, it's about time to leave the house, or leave April's place. We have Mikey, who is lip locking this swimsuit model, and we're having April. It's like, well, hey, uh, you guys aren't willing to just stay a little bit longer, and they're like, no, I think we've overstayed our welcome. And Mikey is like, well, you know what? Before we go, I think it's about that time to get a nice little deep dish action pizza. Oh, wow. Kino is to be at the door, and he is ready to be delivering this pizza to the unsuspecting turtles of him being there. So, because they hadn't ordered any pizza. So, Kino ends up going on and is to have April open the door to him, for Kino to just go on and say, it's like, well, hey, you've ordered so many pizzas anyways, I might as well have given you this one, because the person that I went to just wasn't here, so I thought, you might as well go on and just take this pizza anyways. And so Kino is going on and seeing within April's kitchen counter that there are to be some nunchucks present. And Kino is to look at these nunchucks and look at April and just be like, I don't think you're a chucker guy, are you? So April goes on and takes these nunchucks, like, well, yeah, I love a little nunchucking every once in a while. And Kino's like, yeah, sure, maybe you need a little bit of practice with that. But so we would, of course, have the turtles are just looking on at us, April, just no. So Kino is, of course, just like, okay, I'll buy into this, sure, whatever, but I won't buy into the fact that there is to be a foot being poking out of some little spot, and I'll go on and stomp on this foot and have all the turtles just appear, and Raph be just so upset, is like, please, let me kill him. Let me just murder him a little. Let me just taste him. Let me just, I lost a sign in the first movie, but I'm not going to lose one in this one. I'll lose a sign of man. Because he'll be dead. So, we'd have Kino. It's like, oh, yeah, you guys. I should have figured, yeah. For how April just have so many just pizzas delivered here. There has to be some explanation. Funny enough, we also had, the other apartment people talking to April about, well, hey, you really need to cut out all that screaming and yelling and heavy athletics and the jumping and the yelling and the But anyways, I just remember that. So we'd have to come to need to have Kino, who is to need to learn how the turtles had come into their names by, of course, Splinter having this book. And so we, of course, ramble on to have Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, Leonardo all state their names. And to be very much like the other movie that they had gone on and explained these people's stories. And so Kino, of course, ever the person who is to want to get somehow involved uh, with the procedure of the turtles, is to eventually have them start to be talking about the foot. And Kino's like, oh yeah, like I know about the foot. Like, oh wait, you know about the foot? And Kino's like, well yeah, like they're recruiting people. It's like, hey, like maybe if I get involved somehow, and maybe, and like Splinter's like, no, like no, like that's not gonna happen. It's like you're too young, you're too inexperienced, like we don't want you to get hurt. But like Kino's just like, well yeah, I think I'm just gonna do this anyways. So uh so we go on here, and so Shredder is going on and turning to Tatsu, and he's turning to him, and he's like, well hey, yeah, like we found these two animals, are you sure that these are the vicious most ones that you could have found? It's not the exact word for word of which that he says it better, but I said it that manner. And Tatsu is like, well yeah. It's like, okay, all right. So uh we then go on to have, of course, Perry, who's pouring into the ooze into these little changing room, like metal little shacks or sheds or whatever. So we turn around and have the turtles, who are making their way to this sewer drain to go on and try to find their new home. So one by one, they start going into this little sewer drain. Mikey ends up turning to April, and he's uh, like out of all the lies, and this and that. Elsa, like that's why you're getting on that plane. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. I'm not doing a good job. Um, but so we of course have one of the turtles who's grabbing Mikey. It's like, you've had your fun. So April ends up kind of looking on, and she's like, yeah, all right, and she jumps off. So the turtles all decide to, otherwise, instead of going after the foot and Shredder like they should actually be doing, they're instead looking for their new sewer home. And Raph, of course, ends up getting upset by that. And he's like, you know what? Like, why are we doing this? Like, uh, we should be going after the foot. And Leonardo's like, no, 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 no. Like this is what Splinter wanted. So we're gonna go on and we're gonna do this. So Raph's had enough. He's done. He leaves. Another pouting set for Raph. So all the meanwhile, Mikey's just like, you know what can clear up all of our housing problems? Timeshare. And Raph leaves. So, like, we of course have kind of the bickering of turtles. She's like, well, no, like, we can't do this. No, we can't do that. And Mikey all of a sudden is like, no. And then he falls into the little hole, which leads them to turn on the power. Yeah, yeah. And they, of course, are to find this seemingly condemned subway station of sorts, and this is to end up being their hideout. So turn around, we'd again have Shredder, who is looking on to realize that his freaks are to seemingly be growing a couple of times larger this day. And so we'd go on to have Shredder, who is talking to Tatsu and Perry. And so he's like, well, yeah, like my Foot Clan has failed me in the past, Tatsu's failed me in the past, even I failed in the past. But next time it'll be different. Next time it'll be freak against freak. So we transition to have April, who is at the the news station, and she's talking to her news manager. And bizarrely, her news manager is going on and pitching swimsuit for the 90s. And April's like, yeah, I'm having to forcibly do some fluff piece. Like, no, I want to do something really, like, really interesting. I really want to, like, get my money's worth of what I'm of what I'm going to put into a story. And she's all of a sudden getting a call from Donatello. And so we go on to have this one guy interrupt the news manager in April. Just be like, well, hey, like, you're getting a call. His name says it's Donnie. And the news manager is like, well, hey, like, well, tell Donnie that she can't come to the phone right now because she just can't. And April is to leave and accept the phone call. So April goes on to talk to Donnie, and Donnie is mentioning how it's like, well, it's not much now, but we'll bring it right down. And we really just needed to go on and grab Splinter and get some essentials. And Mikey's like, yeah, the bare essentials. Oh my god, that one bare essentials line is amazing. I love that thing. I've been using that for years now. The bare essentials, for the longest time, and every once in a while, I just kind of bring it up randomly. Um, but then also, it seems I think there was one like NECA action figure that legitimately had like the chips, and they did like the bare essential joke, and it was awesome. It was great. Uh, Also, I really think a lot of those NECA action figures are actually really cool. And then also, it seemed that the original April O'Neil actress was to have to go on and coax the Casey Jones actor, like, hey man, like, do the NECA figure. It's like, you'll not only get a big fat check out of this, but then also like the fans want it. Like the fans want to go on and like want to like just like have you for how beloved that you are. But like the actor was just kind of like, I don't really want to. Anyways, it was a little bit of coaxing in that situation, but hey, all worked out in the end to eventually get that action figure out there for the world. So we'd go on to, of course, have Mikey, who is like, hey, Donnie, give me the phone. And so Donnie is like, well, hey, forward address your blah, blah, blah. And so, like, they're fighting back and forth with the phone, both Mikey and Donnie. And Leo is kind of looking and he's like grabbing all these things and he's just like, man, come on. Like, so Leo, of course, is still upset that Raph had kind of stormed off. And so, uh, like Leo, of course, is also just saying like, well, hey, like if April does go on and see Raph, say like hey, thanks for leaving us and not helping us out. And instead of having to go and look for the foot and whatever, like we have to go on and look for him instead. And also, like Leo was looking at Mikey, is like, well, hey, and also thanks for your help, Michelangelo. And Mikey's like, hey, I'm helping Donnie. It's like, hey, give me the phone, give me the phone. So Mikey eventually gets a phone and is to be doing all smoochy and kisses for April. And Donnie pushes away the phone and like he kind of finishes up the conversation. So Shredder is going on and seeing his seemingly babies seemingly be peeking from out of their little shacks, the little sheds. So he's just like, you know what, like unlock them, like get them out of here, just kind of see what happens. And so like, are you serious, man? And it's like, yeah, like whatever happens, like, you know what, just let it fly here. So Shredder goes on and is to see both Tokar and Razor. He's like, wolf, snapping turtle. And he's like, all right, like if anything, like attack me if you will. But at some point you will call me master. And Token and Razor are looking at one another. It's like, mama? Yeah, mama. And Shredder's like, no, get off me. Do not hug me. Do not love me. And that's when Shredder busts out. He's telling the Foot Clan, it's like, they're babies. Oh, babies. They are babies. So Shredder is turning to Professor Perry here. It's just like they are stupid. And he's just like, well, yeah, maybe they are like intellectually inferior, but like maybe there is some kind of traits that you'll go on and you will want them for. As we come to find, both Tokar and Razor are very strong, like lifting up this certain uh, mechanism of sorts. And Cheddar's like, maybe I'll keep them around for a while. Like, yeah, you will. You will. So we turn around and we have Kino, who is to be at the recruiting place for the Foot Clan. And we are to also see Michael J. White seemingly be in the very front, trying to probably get as much camera time as he can. Michael J. White, the guy who had gone on and eventually been Spawn and a number of other things. Yeah, that guy, Michael J. White, he's in the background of this movie. It's kind of fun. So, Kino is to find out from this recruiter guy. It's like, yeah, like we're gonna put you guys through a little test and like see if you're worth your snuff. And so we'd go on to have Kino, who is to kind of go into this kind of matted place, this padded or matted place, and is to start fighting all of these guys. As Raph is looking on in the distance. Because after Kino is to go on and is to know that he's going for a little test, he turns to Raph and he's like, well, yeah, like I'm in. And Raph is like, well, yeah, but like once we go on and like we find out where they are, like we're gonna do this and that and this and that. And so Kino's like, maybe I should write all this down. Raph is like, what? Like, God, kids. So Kino goes on to fight all these people in this place, and he just busts through all of them. He's like chucking them, tossing them, laughing at them. So we'd have this guy is like, all right, like Kino, like, all right, you've proven yourself worthy, but like you're gonna have one last test. You're gonna have 15 seconds to remove all these bells off of this mannequin, and one sound will get you disqualified. And so Kino's like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to go on and do this. And plus, also, like, there's gonna be a smoke pellet to make this even worse. So the smoke pellet falls, and we all of a sudden hear these sounds of, and Raph had gone on and snuck in and took all the bells and placed them in Kino's hands. And the smoke is finally clear, and Kino's like, well, is this enough? And the foot soldier is like, yeah, all right. So Kino ends up getting brought into the junkyard. So we'd have Kino talking to this foot soldier. It's like, well, yeah, like you go to that guy and you get your dogi and you get your clothes and like, yeah, like, hey man, you made it. And Kino's like, oh yeah, great. I'm just gonna go over here and kind of turn off to Raph here and kind of say like, yeah, man, like we made it. And Raph is just like, well, yeah, like we did it and great. And Raph is to all of a sudden see a kind of shadow of a former foe. And Raph is just like, well, what the heck was that? So Raph is to go on and just kind of see if he was to have seen what he thought he had saw, which is to have been Shredder. Because when Shredder is to go on and return, he was to have kind of very much sharpened his mask and want revenge. And so now he's going to go on and get that here to showcase to Raph that Shredder is still alive and kicking. But so Raph and Kino are looking on, and so Raph is like, well, hey, like we should really try to be as quiet as we can because we don't want to get caught, as Tatsu is to notice that Raph and Kino are there. So Raph plays it off that he's like, well, yeah, like we're looking for some 77 muffler and this and that, and like you wouldn't happen to have one of those now, would you? As he takes his tire, tosses onto the foot, like, hey, Kino, you got to get out of here, right? So Kino, it seems, is to leave, but then he's also like presented with some Foot Clan of himself that he needs to kind of break through here. So Raph ends up going on to uh, face off against the Foot Clan, which of course is like, you never heard of a fair fight, and eventually ends up getting kind of dogpiled upon Raph, and the numbers are to be too great. Raph is to be grabbed, and so Raph is looking on at Tatsu and is looking at his ugly mug, and he, of course, is to make a joke about like, well, man, like you really need to get that all fixed. And Shredder is to come up in Raph's face, and Raph is like, Shredder. It's like, yeah, he's still alive there, buddy. So Kino makes his way to April's apartment, is to be kind of ding donging and all kinds of jazz, but April is to not even be home. And so Kino is going on and like Dawn, come on, Raph's in trouble. Mike, April, it's me, Kino. Where are you? So April ends up showing up. And it's like, well, yeah, like what's going on? Kino, tell me everything. So we then turn around and have, of course, the turtles needing to go on and get to this junkyard. So they make their way to this junkyard, and they're to be as stealthily as they can be, making their way here. And so we get this consistent pattern of them going on and like just kind of like looking at the landscape of things, and they're like, well, yeah, like it's a little too quiet here. Yeah, too quiet. And so they notice that it's Raph. It's like, yeah, like that's Raph. And Mike is like, yeah, a little too Raph. Like, hey, you guys. So we'd have Donatello that rolls up on a few of the foot, and we get the knock knock, and so here's where we get Donatello, who goes on to do the whole kind of like hand to hand upon the stick thing, and we of course had the foot, who is to seemingly at one point be winning of the top of the stick match, but then Donatello ends up just kind of punching him. It's like, well, yeah, like you win. So we go on to eventually have our turtles go on and face off against more foot characters, and we'd go on to have, of course, Shredder, who's like, well, yeah, like I'm gonna show you guys the teacher eye canister, of course, that is to have been something of your past, and is to be a threat against you now. And we'd go on to have Donatello, who is to try and untie Raph, but at first he rips off this paint, or rips off this tape, and Raph ends up turning to Donatello. It's like, why didn't you just rip my lips off? So Donatello's just like, shut up. So he puts the tape back on his face, and he starts untying the ropes. It's like, yeah, I'll get this first. So, alright. I'd completely forgotten about the whole netting thing, so I need to get to that. So, we'd have our turtles then end up realizing that taking out the small amount of foot soldiers that they had gone on to take out, they realized that like it's like, you know what, like it's too quiet, it's too this, it's that, like. So Donnie's like, well, yeah, if they were gonna spring a trap, it would happen right about now. And so all of a sudden we come to find that the ground is kind of shaking and moving around them, and there's to be a big huge massive net to net up uh Donnie, Leo, and Michelangelo. And that is when Shredder appears, that's when the foot appear, and that's when they remove this uh, bit of sheets and whichever to reveal that this netting is going to eventually fall upon these sharp like objects that are eventually going to shish kebab our turtles here. And we'd have just kind of funny things that are kind of thrown in here, where Michelangelo is talking about sending a letter to Ralph Nader and this and that, and talking about how well constructive these ropes are and this and that. So all this all comes to a head where Splinter is to come in and is to have his bow and arrow, and is to free the turtles from their net. And it's like, well, yeah, we got mutual Splinter, man, and like coming in and start punching and beating the crap out of everybody. So that, of course, is when we free Raph. That is to go on and be where Shredder comes in with the container. It's like, well, yeah, like this will be your undoing. This container that had created you, but it's now be your undoing. So we come to find out that undoing is to really just open up the doors of both Tokar and Razor to come in, and we'd have Shredder who's like, "Well, prove yourselves to me, attack!" So we'd of course have Raph who comes up first, and he's just like, "Well, like the bigger they are, the more bones they break." Ugh. And we'd have, I believe, Donnie goes in and he's like, "Yeah, you ugly excuse for a turtle," and he ends up smacking him. And he's like, "Yeah, that didn't work." So he's like, "Yeah, about that whole ugly excuse for the turtle thing. Yeah, you're gonna get tossed, buddy. You're gonna get launched, and you're gonna eventually find Professor, uh, the professor, and and you're gonna rip off his lips as well." And Donnie's like, "Man, I gotta get better at this," and we'd have the professor that's just like, "Oh no, yeah, that's fine. Like you freed me anyways." So so we'd have our turtles that are to get kind of tossed and thrown around here. We'd have Mikey, who almost kind of get kind of dog piled on, kind of like how Raph was, but somehow he like slips from out of the dog pile and he's like looking at all the Foot Clan just beating on something, and he's like, "Hey, what you guys doing?" But yeah, a lot of fun being had with our characters here. But so we'd go on to have one of the turtles go flying and they find the sewer. And so then ends up having Mikey turn to Raph. It's like, "Well, yeah, like, hey, like, we found the sewer, like, come on down." And Raph is like, "Well, yeah, in a minute. Like, we're kind of dealing with not only the Foot and Tokan Razor, but hey, like, you're being over there." So the turtles start making their way through to open this kind of car door. You're just gonna slide through these vehicles. So Shredder is going on and telling Toker and Razor, it's like, "Well, hey, like get through here." So the professor and all the turtles are forcing their way down the sewer in a very quick like fashion, and that then leads to have Tokar and Razor follow. And so we'd have Toka, who is to try and fall into the sewer hole, to find that he's far too big, and he ends up getting stuck halfway through. So Mikey ends up looking at him like, "Look at this!" And he's like, so they're all just like, "Nah, whatever, let's go on, let's walk away here." And the professor, of course, is just kind of stuck on the fact that it's like, "Oh my god, like 4 walking, talking turtles." And they're like, "Well, yeah, dude, we can explain." And immediately the professor just kind of busts out, Professor Jordan Perry here. He goes on to bust out, it's like, "No, like, I don't need an explanation. Like, I know everything." And so he immediately states, like, 15 years ago, like, the 4 of you uh, were to go through a primordial ooze and like mutate into into what eventually you become, and this and that. And they're like, "Yeah." Like, I guess that's something we didn't need to explain after all. So they all just kind of walk off. So Splinter is to see the professor, and it's like, well, hey, like he can definitely give us answers here. So the professor goes on and tries to explain to the turtles eventually that a canister had, for some reason or other, had gotten lost. And man, we're an hour and 20 minutes in already. Holy so and so this whole story, it all comes down to it just being a big mistake. And so when any of the turtles are to go on and not quite figure out exactly what's going on, they turn to someone else like, huh? What did he say? It's like, oh, it was a big mistake. And so like that's the only thing that is kind of coming across here. So we go on to have Shredder, who is going on to take both Token and Razor out for a fun night. Go, play, have fun. And we have both Token and Razor who are taking uh, these uh, these poles, and they're knocking them down, and they're chewing into them, and we'd all of a sudden have these two people that are just like, oh my god, look at those monsters, they're creating so much havoc. And what are they going to do if they come over here? And the one woman's like, they can get their own taxi. So April goes on to have this report done on the chaos that was to have happened the night before, and she then turns to Chief Stearns and is trying to figure out what exactly the police force is going to do about this. And April is going on and saying that April believes that these would be very dangerous things out there, and the chief is just like, well, what exactly? And April's like, well, I can't tell you that. And he's like, well, what exactly can you tell me? And that they're just dangerous things. And so like the chief is just like, whatever. Like, so April goes on, and more that she talks to the chief, she realizes that he's not the man suited for the job. And the chief is like, well, like, that's to go on and just be the job that we do very well, Miss O'Neill. So we'd have April that goes back to her crew and realizes that she's a man short. It's like, well, hey, like, where is Freddy? And the guy states like, well, yeah, like he's gone sick. So April goes back to her van to get grabbed by Freddy, and Freddy ends up telling April, it's like, well, hey, we have a message for your friends. So April makes her way back to meet up with, I believe it's Mikey, and both of them are going through the sewer. And Mikey's like, well, hey, like, you're not being followed, are you? And April's like, no, like, they don't need to. It's like, the message is to be sent to just have you guys come to them. So April goes on and states that if they do not come to the construction site tonight, that they're going to send out Tokar and Razor again, but to Central Park. And Donatello is just like, well, like that doesn't sound right. Like, there's gonna be all of those people out there, and forcing them to realize that, like, well, yeah, like if they don't go to the construction site, that there is gonna be a risk of civilian life here. So we'd have our characters realizing that there are no match against Tokar and Razor, but they have to go out anyways. And we'd have the professors like, well, maybe we can even the odds. Like maybe we can come up with a way of creating an anti-mutagen. And they're like, well, like we can just spray those guys, right? And the professor's like, no, they need to digest this stuff. Like, well, what are we gonna do with that? So we then, of course, would come up with a pre-fight donut. So we'd have our turtles making their way to this construction site, and so like they're kind of making their way kind of slowly but surely to this construction site, and Raph ends up going like, okay, Shredder, and Donatello turns to Raph like, oh yeah, thanks Raph, I'll never have the hiccups again. And that of course is when all the lights come on and Shredder makes his way. It's like, all right, like two man enter, one man leave. Like this is Thunderdome, baby. Like you guys are gonna die. Like say your prayers now and eat your vitamins because you're gonna get to sleep in here pretty soon. So we'd have the turtles that are just kind of cowering in fear as they are to see Tokar and Razor in their armor, in their gear, in their whatever. So we'd have Mikey who just is kind of nudging Leo here. It's like, hey man, like do the plan, do the thing. And so Leo's like, okay, wait, wait. And so he brings up the traditional pre-fight donut. And so the people are just like, huh? Like, what is this? So Tokar and Razor are to come up to Mikey. Mikey's like, and Leo is looking at Mikey. It's like, this isn't going to work. And Mikey's like, it's going to work. So they start to give him donuts and they call him num nums and tell him to, like, yeah, like scarf it down. So they start to eat them. First, we see Razor eating them. And then Tokar is like, well, nah, noms. It's like, okay, all right, go on, you take them. So the more and more both Tokar and Razor are like looking at one another and they're just like, huh? And so Razor takes one of the donuts and is to crush him, and it's like they find the cube. So Don tells like, oh, like he was thinking, it's like, yeah, it's gonna work. They'll eat anything, but then he realizes, oh, they find the cubes. So they realize that this is all for naught. So Shredder's like, get him. Shredder goes on and has Tokar and Razor attack. So Razor ends up grabbing Mikey for a spin cycle. We'd have Tokar, who ends up taking Leo and ends up tossing him. So Mikey is spinning, he's going for a spin cycle. It's hilarious. And he ends up, of course, getting tossed seemingly after Leonardo. And Leo is kind of looking on at the horror of Mikey and is just kind of like, hey man, like. So Mikey ends up going flying. They end up picking Mikey, and so like eventually we get to the ugly one thing. So we'd have like our characters are like, well, yeah, I'll take on the ugly one. I'll take on the one. Which one's the ugly one? It's like the who's on first kind of thing. And so we'd realize that the Eternals are having to further and further back up here to then come to find that they are to bizarrely make it into some nightclub. And that nightclub is to be seemingly be forming a vanilla ice. And so by the time our turtles are fully immersed within this nightclub or this concert or whatever it legitimately is, we'd come to find that when Tokar and Razor are to enter this place, they are to all of a sudden start to burp and fart and whichever. It's the obvious like humor of which that is to be in any number of these things. hilariously in a manner of which that is to be of farting and burping jokes. So Donatello ends up going on and taking this tie and like rah rah, and so we'd have, of course, Vanilla Ice going on and doing the go ninja go. He bizarrely used to have this beat kind of playing in the background, and he's just like, well, yeah, like I think we can do something with this. Villains, you better run in, ha! And starts singing the whole song, just off the cuff. So we'd go on to have Perry, who's trying to figure out like what the heck that they're gonna do here, as Donatello is talking to Perry, and Perry is obviously noticing that they're retarding the reaction of 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 what's going on here. Like there's a side effect that the burping is just kind of reversing what they're trying to do here. So they're trying to come up with a solution to figure out a mixture of something that will like speed it back up. And they come to find that there is a fire extinguisher that is to have a certain number of like CO2 catalyst and this and that. And Donatello's like pure genius. So we have this nightclub owner that is going on and talking to this other guy, and the club owner is like, "Well, hey, I didn't order any extras, and like call the police. Like, I didn't want this." So Kino is with Splinter, and Kino, I'm trying to speed this up as much as possible. I realize I'm going over time here. My bad. I'm sorry. I suck at this. I really do. But I'm trying my best. I'm having fun. Anyways, if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. So Kino is talking with Splinter, and they're meditating, and they're like, And Kino's like, like I should be out there with the guys. And Splinter is like, no, like, you have youth, I have experience. And Kino's like, well, yeah, but that's not going to keep me here. And Splinter's like, well, yeah, like I get that too. And so Kino bails, he leaves. So we'd have the turtles that go on to roll out these barrels and have both Tokar and Razor fall on them. And we'd have our turtles jumping on top of Tokar and Razor to spray the fire extinguishers into them, like open wide. So we then, of course, would have the Foot Clan coming in, and Tatsu is to come in, and the club owner is to have gotten the police on the line, and the club owner is telling the other guy, it's like, no, they like it. Yeah, they like it. Go, 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 go. So Tatsu ends up coming in, and that's when Leo is to call the wishbone crunch onto bizarrely, whatever that means. So we'd have the turtles that all decide to give their backs to Tatsu and smash right into him. And so Tatsu's like, oh, and he falls over. So that's, of course, when the guys are just like, yeah, we did it. Yeah, this is awesome. And they start dancing, and we see Kevin Backstreet Boys doing da 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 da, go ninja, go, and doing the kick and the twirl and the dance and the whatevers. So we'd have all of the turtles who are to immerse upon this stage, and Mikey's like, "You like what you saw? Give it up to these turtles!" And all of a sudden, Shredder is to come in and ruin all of this good time and party and happiness. And he is to grab this one girl, and is to like, hey, like, don't come any closer or I'll fill her with this. And he has a little bit of like small sliver of just ooze left that he can go on and dab this girl with. And We then, of course, would have Kino, who's coming flying in almost because this guy is running so freaking fast into this club, and he's like, "Yeah, I got it, I got it." And then he goes and he does this freaking roundhouse kick. Kick is the this from out of this man's uh like grasp, and we have the turtles that are like, okay, man, like let's go on and like let's crank up this stereo or this speaker, this volume on the speaker, and let's guitar this guy to death. So we'd have the turtles like yeah, rock and roll, yeah, yeah, hit any button, and we'd have Shredder ends up getting hit with this massive speaker. He ends up going flying. The girl is seemingly safe, and we'd come to find that the turtles realize, like, hey, Kino, like you really should not have gone and done that. And Kino's like, yeah, I get it. Like I got taught that from a rat that I should not have gone on and participated. I get it. And like, yeah, good for you. Like the moral of the day. So the turtles are to come to find that both Tokar and Razor are now their normal animal selves. And so they split to go on to figure out where Shredder is to go on and be. And they naturally go on and assume that like Shredder has kind of been dealt with, so they're like, well, hey, anything left to do is just cowabunga, right? And we have a cowabunga fail as Shredder is to go on and burst through this little pier here and start to crumble the pier, forcing our turtles to meet face to face with this super Shredder. And so we'd have our turtles now realizing that this is a super Shredder, and they're like, oh my god, he must have drank all of it, all of that ooze. So the more and more Shredder is to wreak havoc through this pier, the more our turtles are to go on and realize that it's like, well, like, Shredder, you need to listen to reason. Like, you can't go on and just and tear this tier apart, because like you're gonna tear us apart too. And Super Shredder would go on and grab Leo. It's like, well, so be it, and he tosses him. And so, since the turtles are to realize there's no reasoning with Shredder, that they just need to become masters of their environment and don't forget that they're turtles and just jump from off of the pier to eventually see our Super Shredder just go on and have all of this pier like stuff just fall upon him. So we'd have the turtles that are to start to poop, 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 all just to shell up here, and they then thrust themselves on to the rubble that is to be left behind them. And they're all to just be like, all right, like, man, that was awful. It's like, I said it before, I said it again. Man, do I love being a turtle. And they're just like, yeah, all right. And they're like, well, yeah, like, there's no way that Shredder survived that. And then all of a sudden we see this hand is like, and it's just like, well, yeah, that's the end of the Shredder. Like, we're gonna go on through the rest of this movie franchise without the one thing that everyone loved and always only cared about. So we'd have Splinter that is to go on and watch the April news report, and is to notice that Perry is to give a shout out to them and is to just name off Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, and Leonardo, and this and that. And April is like, well, I can't exactly say what all this message actually means to these dudes, but I think it's safe to say with the news that is going to be seemingly being presented on a very fast speeding newspaper that somehow Splinter is to get a hold of. Ninja Rap is born. So we'd have all the turtles that are going on, and it's like, well, yeah, man, we did it, we made it, we Frere Jacques it, man. Frere Jacques, Donnie, give it up. So, like, yeah, man, but Cowabunga says it all, yeah, Cowabunga slap. And so Splinter is going on like, well, you seen? Like, no, we practice the art of invisibility, huh? It's like, oh, well, it's like, yeah, that's great and all, but if anything, I have a newspaper that says otherwise. So we'd go on to have Splinter, who is to have forced his turtles to do 10 flips now. And so, like, at first he goes on and has Leo and Raph go on and do the 10 flips. And then he has, of course, Mikey go on and do the 10 flips. But then he, like, makes it sound like he does the flips with his clapping. And we'd have, like, Splinter, who's to notice that. Mikey's like, yeah, one, yeah. And so by the end of this, we have all the turtles flip. And he's like, remember, go ninja, go. He's like, I created another funny, ha ha ha. And that's the way the movie just ends. So with that said, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. Yeah, I liked this movie. It was so good. So good. With all the flack that I gave it and all the crap that I stowed upon it, it's still just a great film. It's still really enjoyable and it's still a lot of fun. Maybe one day I'll go on and collect all the things that have to have been with Ninja Turtles at some point, and maybe also because I already had the whole collection of the whole entire cartoon original show. So maybe at some point I'll dust those bad boys off. But if anything, I'd also eventually like to go on and do the cartoons if really they were actually ever really trending to do. I would love that for once. Uh, but yeah, but if anyways I'm gonna get out of here, I've talked for far too freaking long. I'm sorry. Um, but then again, I turn around, I'm like, I don't really care. I don't know, whatever. It's fun. Um, but hey, at the end of the day, I had fun. Hopefully, you had some kind of fun reflecting on this film. Let me know in the comments below your favorite scene, your favorite thing about this film. Maybe you love this film compared to all the others. You like the goofy kookiness about it. Um, but yeah, also this movie is to be in loving memory of Jim Henson. So like, it's great to have reflected on that. With really Jim Henson's company really being involved in these films and these movies. So, with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.